This is my very favorite room in the whole museum. And the way it got started was I was up in the old museum and I saw this little frame with a piece of paper hanging out, no glass, but I wasn't sure what it was, so I took it down to look at it and found out it was a diploma that Gene Vadner had gotten when he graduated from barber school. And so I took it home and put the glass in and ironed the paper and got it back in there. And then I found a little picture of him in the barber shop. This is Eugene Vadner, now we called him Gene. And he was the nicest old gentleman you ever want to meet. And so we framed it and put that up there. And then his chair, of course. And this is the way they had the paper over the back so that you didn't put your head on the backrest where somebody else had been, with between the oil and the hair and whatever else might be in the hair. So they had a roll of paper that used to go through there. And anyway, Ross Geithman was his son-in-law. He married Leona Vadner, and he took over the barbershop after Gene had it. But the way back to the diploma, from what I understand, Gene and his brother came to Ulen, and after he'd gotten his diploma, and they decided to stop here and see if they needed a barbershop. So Gene started a barbershop here, and his brother went to Lake Park and started a barbershop. But anyway, he was in this shop then for 20s and 30s at least. And then Ross Geithman, his son-in-law, took over after that. And we thank Ross for keeping all of these things and donating them to the old museum. Anyway, we decided, after all this, I decided we've got to have a room for Gene Vadner's barbershop. And so, and the old sign that you saw just a bit ago, that was the original old sign. And so anyway, I was lucky enough to find some old doors and shutters on a boulevard shopping one time and decided that'd be perfect for here. And then still can't believe it, but a friend and I were shopping on the boulevard and we found this huge mirror. In fact, there were two of them. She got one and I got the other. And I thought that's just perfect for the barbershop. So anyway, we were able to get it home without breaking it, getting it on the wall without breaking it. And so all of the items here are items that Gene used and Ross used, clippers and the brush and so forth, all those things, and the little bottles. And then down below were some of the cups that some of the customers, his clients, would use those cups, their own separate private cups. The little old potbelly stove was also the original in the barber shop. And he burned, I'm not sure, it looks like it was coal that he burned in it. But anyway, and then there's a little picture on the wall on the other side that is a recent one. I just took a copy of it. It's not very clear, but it's Ross sitting in one chair, and then Kenneth Sundry is sitting in the other, and they're just sitting there visiting. And then the barber pole was real interesting. They're very expensive to buy, but I just had to have a barber pole. So I took a big old tube that came in with a rug, carpet or rug wrapped around it, and cut it off. And then we've got a dear person here in town that does welding and so forth, Earl Mesker. And anytime we need something, we call on Earl Mesker and he comes to the rescue. Told him I wanted some kind of a towel holder or something to hold that up there, and then we put a regular old, just a light bulb or globe from a light on top of it. But he's so handy. He's done so many things for us. He built our cage windows in the back of the store, the bars to put on the store. And he also remodeled some of the models, the model bodies for clothing that we got, and from Steel Shields Hardware. And he extended those because they were just half bodies. And so he even extended those for us. So you can see Earl Mesker all over the place. Okay, this is our, I guess you'd call it Toys R Us from 1800s or something. Many of these pieces were donated by Bernice Wrighton. And in fact, this was hers when she was a little girl. And then she gave it to Danielle Lucken or Danielle Weeby. So she just donated this just recently. But several of them belong to Bernice Wrighton. This one back here in the corner, that was Mrs. Christine Favix. And she always says that all of her children were carried in this. She pushed all of these children, her whole family, Christine Favix, in that carriage. And there's some very, very cute ones. This one is just darling up here. This is donated by Leonard Favik. And then Down here on the floor, there's a little blue crib, and that was made by Elvin Stavin, who's one of the old-timers here. And he was a father to Mrs. Orsvavik. And so anyway, he made that doll bed. And he made it for Helen Hansen, who later was Helen Hildy. And I guess that's about it, because there are so many of them that belong to Bernice. And that's about it, I guess. Oh, this doll up here, that was donated by Orland and Pat Wang. And that had been given to her by Kathleen Severson, who was Oli Severson's wife. This is a really, really interesting piece. It used to sit above the mercantile store, which is now Dale's. It sat up in the corner, and when people had a long-distance call, very few people had telephones, and so when they had a long-distance call, they would look out the window and holler to someone down below and tell them, "Will you go get so-and-so? They have a phone call." Then they'd go back up to the central office and take the call up there. And this happened a lot because we didn't have a telephone either. But anyway, this was the switchboard, and it was purchased and bought in Twin Valley, and then it came to Ulen. And all the little numbers are on there, the people's numbers. And sometimes before that, they would just go by rings. It would be one short and a long, or two long and a short, or something like that. And then people would pick up their phone, because there were many people on the line, and it's what they call party lines. And so, of course, there was a lot of rubbernecking going on, too. They'd pick up the phone, whether it was their ring or not, and listen to what was going on. And so, whatever anybody said on the telephone, they were very careful, because they knew somebody was probably listening in. But over the years, in fact, from about 1919 to 1952, there were a lot of operators, and I'm going to read them because we don't want to forget somebody. And it started, one of the first ones was Minnie Cook. Next one was Mrs. Ole Ide, Minnie Hansen, Mrs. Art Peterson, Stella Hauge, Violet Peterson, Cora Eine, Emma Ingebrigtsen, Mrs. Torrance Dahl, Mrs. Elmer Brenna, Harriet Wang, Dolores Hildy, and Darlene Hildy. So they had a lot of operators over the years. It looks very complicated to me, and I'm sure it was to those girls too. But it's what started the switchboards are entirely different now. I don't even know if they have switchboards anymore. But it's a cute little piece. We just had to polish it up a little bit. And it has this nice little swivel chair. And it has that same material in the seat, just like that little love seat in the store. And of course, this is what they had around their head to be able to speak into and to hear. And I noticed there's some safety pins holding it together, and it's pretty shredded. This little piece of binding that holds it is pretty bad shape. But it's all here, and we're so thankful for it that it was donated to the museum.
Gisli Hildy, and I'm from Ulen, and I've lived here all my life. And I'm going to